When I was a kid, my parents used to joke that I came out of the womb paying rent. I'd laugh with them back then, thinking it was a compliment, that I was independent, responsible, mature for my age. But now that I'm 26, I can see that what they really meant was that I was useful. The kind of kid who never complained, never asked for anything, and handled problems so they didn't have to. My name's Luis, and I've spent most of my life being the reliable one. The one who picks up the pieces. The one who doesn't fall apart so others can afford to. Especially my younger sister, Sophia. Sophia is 2 years younger than me and has always been delicate, according to my mom. I don't even remember when that label started. She cried a lot as a baby, and somehow that set the tone for everything that followed. Bad grade. She's just sensitive. Skipped classes. She's under a lot of pressure. Blames someone else for her mistake. She needs support, not judgment. I, on the other hand, got told I was resilient, which I've come to understand is code for, we expect you to take it, no matter how unfair it is. Growing up, it felt like everything revolved around Sophia's mood. If she was anxious, the whole house tiptoed around her. If she was mad, we rearranged plans. If she was quiet, we catered and consoled. I got used to eating dinner cold because she had a meltdown before the food hit the table. I got used to sitting through long car rides listening to her vent about friends who abandoned her after not replying to her texts for 5 hours. And I got used to never, ever bringing up my own problems because the moment I did, my mom would shoot me that look, the one that said, "Not now. Can't you see your sister is struggling?" So I became the ghost of the family. Present, but not seen. Heard, but never really listened to. At 19, I started working 2 jobs. One at a delivery hub from 6 a.m. to 2 p.m., and another stocking shelves overnight at a grocery store. I was enrolled in a local community college, taking online classes when I could stay awake long enough to focus. I wasn't chasing some grand dream. I just wanted enough to get out, to have a place of my own, somewhere quiet, somewhere where I didn't have to knock on my own bedroom door, because Sophia had claimed it for her mental health spa day. It took me 5 years of missed parties, broken sleep cycles, and saying no to every single vacation or impulse buy. But earlier this year, I finally did it. I paid off a modest 1-bedroom apartment in a building downtown. It's nothing fancy, just clean walls, a squeaky faucet, and my own keys. But to me, it was everything. I didn't announce it with fanfare. No Instagram post, no family group text, no look at me moment. I just signed the final payment, sat on the floor with a slice of gas station pizza, and let myself feel proud. I told my parents a few weeks later, over dinner at their house. Sophia was there, scrolling on her phone while I talked. I said it quietly, almost like a confession, because even then, I was expecting a mild shrug and a "that's nice, honey." And that's exactly what I got. My dad said, "Good job, son," without looking up from the TV. My mom asked if I'd thought about investing the money instead of locking it into real estate so early. Sophia asked if I'd decorated it. Or is it just a sad guy apartment with a mattress on the floor? I laughed it off. I always do. But deep down, something shifted. Not because I needed their validation, but because it was the first time I realized they weren't ever going to give it. Not unless it had something to do with Sophia. And even then, I'd only be the shadow on her spotlight. 3 months after that dinner, I got a text from my mom. "Hey, Dad and I want to come by and talk about something. Sophia too. It's important." No emojis. No context. Just important. I asked if everything was okay. She said, "Yes. Just family stuff. You'll understand when we explain." They insisted on meeting at a cafe near my place. Not my apartment. Not their house. Neutral ground. That was my first red flag. The second came when I showed up and saw Sophia already seated with a caramel latte and a folder on the table in front of her. My parents arrived 2 minutes later, both dressed like they were attending a brunch interview. Nice jackets, serious faces. I sat down, still trying to convince myself that maybe they were planning some surprise family vacation. Maybe Sophia got into a program or something and they wanted to celebrate. Maybe this was a rare moment where I wasn't just being dragged into someone else's mess. I should have known better. My dad cleared his throat. My mom gave Sophia a little nod. And Sophia, my sweet, sensitive, always somehow wounded sister, slid the folder across the table and said, "We were thinking it's time to put my name on your apartment deed." Just like that. No preamble. No joke. No sugarcoating. Just boom. Hand over half of what I worked 5 years to earn. I blinked, thinking I must have heard wrong. I'm sorry, what? My mom jumped in. Not the whole thing, Mijo. Just as co-owner. That way Sophia has something to fall back on. You know how hard the market is right now. My dad chimed in like this was some rational legal discussion and not a slap across the face. It's just smart planning. She's still finding her footing. If she doesn't get on the property ladder now, she might be left behind forever. I stared at them, heart pounding, thoughts scattering. Was this real? Was this a prank? A test? Sophia looked at me with this mix of defiance and guilt, like she knew it sounded ridiculous but had already convinced herself it was fair. You've always been better with money, Luis. I need a little help. This wouldn't change anything day to day. I wouldn't move in or anything. Just, security. Security. That word hit me like a brick, because I remembered all the times I'd had none. All the nights I'd walked home in the dark after my shift because I couldn't afford gas. All the meals I'd skipped to make rent. All the birthdays I spent working doubles. And not once did any of them offer me security. I was never the one they worried about. And now, when I'd finally made it out, just barely, they wanted to tie a weight around my ankle and call it helping family. I didn't say anything for a long moment. I just looked at Sophia, then at my mom, then at the folder still sitting in front of me like a loaded gun wrapped in manila paper. And that's when I knew something had to change. I smiled, just barely, nodded like I was considering it, and said, okay, let's talk about it. Because what they didn't know, what they hadn't even bothered to ask, was that I'd already made a few quiet moves of my own. Moves that would flip this entire conversation on its head. And all it would take was one document. I leaned back in my chair, keeping my voice calm, my face unreadable, the way I'd learned to do from years of being the family pressure valve. So, I said, tapping the folder, this is what exactly? Some kind of legal draft? A co-ownership agreement? Sophia perked up like she thought I was on board. Yeah, just something informal for now. I had a friend of a friend help draft it. She's in pre-law. Pre-law. I opened the folder and scanned the page. It wasn't even remotely informal. It had clauses, percentage breakdowns, and a line where I'd sign over joint ownership of the apartment to her. A place that I bought, paid off, furnished, cleaned, and called home, suddenly being packaged like a hand-me-down sweater she forgot to pack for college. I looked up slowly. You didn't tell me you were preparing legal paperwork. My mom smoothed her napkin over her knee. We didn't want you to overthink it and say no before you understood the bigger picture. My dad nodded. You're doing well now, Luis. This is your chance to help your sister. Family looks out for each other. That phrase, family looks out for each other, hit me like a slap. I must have heard it 100 times growing up, but always when it was time for me to give something up. My room, my birthday, my plans, my silence. But it never swung both ways. When I was 15 and needed braces, we couldn't afford it. When Sophia needed therapy, they pulled me out of my after-school robotics program to cover the costs. I didn't even argue. I just nodded and said I understood. I always understood. I stared at the folder again and asked, why now? Sophia blinked. What do you mean? Why not when I bought the place? Why not when I made the down payment 2 years ago? Or the day I moved in? Why now, when it's paid off, no mortgage, and increasing in value? No one spoke. So I kept going. Is this about your credit score? Or student loans? Or the fact that you don't have a job right now? Sophia's expression hardened. That's not fair. I'm just trying to understand, I said, voice still calm, still quiet, but sharp enough now that my mom flinched. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you waited until all the risk was gone, and now you want to share in the reward. She crossed her arms. You always think everything's about money. My dad jumped in. Don't talk to her like that. You're twisting things. This is about her future. About security. There it was again. I looked down at my hands, fingers lightly stained with ink from this morning's paperwork. I'd signed the final property tax bill that confirmed I was, legally and financially, the sole owner of the place. I hadn't even told anyone. It should have been a proud moment. But instead, here I was, being told to dilute everything I'd worked for because someone else might fall behind. I leaned back. You guys ever asked me how I got here? My mom blinked. What do you mean? I mean, have you ever sat down and asked what it took to buy that apartment? How many hours I worked? How many times I walked home in the rain because I couldn't afford an Uber after a double shift? Sophia rolled her eyes. You make everything sound like a sob story. I smiled. Not because it was funny, but because that line right there, that was the tipping point. That was the exact moment I knew there was no coming back. I stood up slowly, folder still in my hand. All right, I think I've heard enough for today. My mom stood too. Luis, don't be dramatic. We're just trying to talk like adults. Oh, I know. I just need some air. I left the cafe without another word. Let them stew. Let them think I was cracking under pressure. That was what they always expected anyway. For me to fold, to keep the peace, to compromise. But something had snapped. And it wasn't the kind of thing that heals overnight. The call started that evening. First from my mom. Then Sophia. Then my dad. I didn't pick up. I spent the night walking the city, hands in my pockets, headphones on, replaying every moment from that meeting. Every word. Every fake smile. Every time they used the word fair like it meant anything coming from them. I didn't sleep much. But when the sun came up, I'd already made a decision. The next few days were interesting. Quiet, but loaded. My parents didn't bring it up again right away, but I could tell they were waiting for me to cool down and come crawling back with an apology. That was the cycle. I push back. They play hurt. I come back around. We pretend nothing happened. Not this time. That weekend, I went over to their house for dinner. Not because I wanted to, but because I wanted to see what they'd say when they saw I hadn't budged. I brought a bottle of wine, like nothing was wrong. Sat at the table, made small talk, asked about the neighbors. For about 30 minutes, we played house. Until Sophia brought it up. So, she said, stabbing a forkful of salad. Have you had time to look over the co-ownership form? Like she was asking if I'd read a new book or seen the latest Marvel movie. I kept my face neutral. I did. Still thinking about it. My dad set down his fork. We really hope you make the right choice, son. This could change her life. I nodded slowly. You're right. It could. The tension hung in the air like a storm cloud. And then my mom added the part that made my stomach twist. We told your tia Maritza about it. She said it's a beautiful gesture. Said you're such a good brother. I froze. You told other people? My mom waved her hand like it was no big deal. Just family. They're all really proud of you. Said it's time Sophia caught a break. Sophia smiled like she was already planning her Instagram caption. And that was it. That was the moment the betrayal stopped being silent and became a full-on campaign. They'd gone and told people, our family, that I was gifting her half the apartment. They'd turned my personal milestone into a charity case. They were parading my sacrifice before I'd even agreed to it. I excused myself from the table and went into the bathroom, locked the door, stared at my reflection. And that's when I broke. Not in a loud, dramatic way, but in a cold, focused kind of way. I pulled out my phone, opened the scanned PDF I'd kept saved in a hidden folder. The one document they hadn't seen yet. The one that changed everything. The ownership transfer. No, not to Sophia. To a trust. A private, single beneficiary trust I'd opened a year ago when I first sensed the storm clouds forming. I'd moved the deed into it quietly. Legally. Irrevocably. My name was no longer on the apartment. And the only beneficiary listed? Me. Sole and undisputed. They couldn't touch it now. Not without breaking federal law. But I wasn't going to show them that just yet. Because if they wanted to play games, I had a few of my own. The next 2 weeks were a weird mix of fake niceties and guilt-laced texts. Sophia sent me long messages about how things had been so hard lately, and how this would really help her get back on her feet. My mom sent me articles about siblings co-owning property and why it strengthens family bonds. My dad sent nothing. He just showed up unannounced at my building once, leaning on the buzzer for 10 minutes straight until I finally shut off the speaker. The worst part? I started getting messages from cousins. Hey, heard you did something amazing for Sophia. That's so generous, man. I told my sister about what you're doing. She cried. You're such a good role model, bro. Every message was like a dagger. Because now I was being guilt not just in private, but in public. The campaign had gone full PR mode. And the longer I stayed silent, the more it looked like I had agreed to it. Like I was the kind of saint who gave away half an apartment and never bragged about it. They were rewriting the story, and I wasn't even in the room. I finally responded to Sophia, short and sweet. We need to talk. Come by the apartment Thursday at 6. Don't bring mom and dad. She texted back a thumbs-up emoji. Thursday came. She showed up wearing a new jacket and boots. Smiling, holding 2 iced coffees. Peace offering, she said, handing me one. I took it and stepped aside. She looked around my apartment like she already owned it. Wow, you really made it cozy in here. Definitely doesn't feel like a sad guy apartment. I gave a tight smile. Thanks. We sat. I let the silence hang for a bit. Then I asked, did you really tell people I signed the apartment over? Her eyes darted. I didn't say you signed it. Just that you were thinking about it. Did Mom and Dad know you were spreading it around? She hesitated. It's not like we were blasting it. Just it came up. You should be proud. You're setting an example. Setting an example. I repeated. Then I reached under the coffee table and pulled out a sealed envelope. She looked confused. What's that? Something you haven't seen yet. I slid it toward her slowly, deliberately. Before you open it, I said, leaning forward, I want to ask you something. She straightened up, suddenly alert. Why do you think you deserve this apartment? Her lips parted, but no sound came. She didn't answer. She didn't have to, because the silence was finally saying everything. And when she opened the envelope, it was going to say even more. I watched Sophia's fingers hover over the envelope like it might bite her. For once, she didn't have a clever comeback or a dramatic gasp. No fake tears, no guilt-trip voice. Just that flicker of hesitation she never used to show me. It was small, but I caught it. And for the first time in my life, I felt the balance tip ever so slightly. But I didn't push her. I didn't need to. Because when she finally opened the envelope and read the first page, she went pale. I'd printed the trust documentation front and back. All 28 pages, complete with notarization and a letter from my lawyer explaining that, as of last year, the apartment was no longer personally owned by me, but legally protected under the name of a trust with one irrevocable beneficiary, me. Not even a court could force me to share it unless I chose to. And I didn't choose to. I never would. Sophia read the first paragraph 3 times before the words started sinking in. I could tell by the way her jaw clenched and her eyes stopped skimming and started seeing. When she finally looked up at me, her voice was barely above a whisper. You already moved it? I nodded once. Last summer. Her lips curled, just slightly. You didn't even tell anyone? Nope. That's shady, Luis. I leaned forward. No, Sophia. What's shady is showing up to a cafe with pre-law paperwork to claim half of something you didn't earn. What's shady is telling half our family I already said yes. What's shady is pretending you don't know exactly what you're doing. She swallowed hard, but said nothing. For once, the silence felt like mine. I stood up and walked to the door. You can keep the copy. Give Mom and Dad one, too. You think this makes you some kind of hero? She snapped, voice rising now that her shock was turning into shame. I opened the door and said nothing. She stood there for a second, then grabbed her purse, shoved the envelope into it like it was burning her fingers, and walked out without another word. But before the door even clicked shut, I felt it, the hollow weight in my chest that told me this wasn't a win. Because revenge, no matter how clean, doesn't come with applause. It doesn't feel like a parade. It feels quiet, final, lonely. And when she left, I just stood in that same small apartment I'd bled for, the one they tried to turn into a bargaining chip. And for the first time in months, I let myself feel it. The weight, the fatigue, the ache I'd been ignoring for years. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. But that night, I barely slept. Because despite all of it, the manipulation, the betrayal, the entitlement, that was still my family. And I had just burned the bridge that connected me to them. The next few weeks were weird. My parents didn't call. Not even a guilt text. No cryptic messages. No pop-ins. No fake check-ins. Nothing. They ghosted me. And the silence wasn't peaceful. It was punishing. See, growing up, the worst thing my mom could do wasn't yelling. It was ignoring. She had this way of withdrawing her attention like oxygen, and suddenly the whole house would suffocate in tension. My dad followed her lead. Sophia thrived in it. And I used to panic. Try to fix it. Apologize for things I didn't even do just to get the air flowing again. But not this time. This time, I let the silence stretch. I let it grow teeth. And when the loneliness hit, I didn't run to them. I sat with it. I learned to live with it. But it was hard. God, it was hard. I stopped going to the gym. Lost my appetite. I'd come home from work, sit on the couch in the dark, and stare at the ceiling for hours. I kept replaying the cafe conversation in my head, wondering if I'd overreacted. If I should have handled it differently. If maybe, just maybe, I was the selfish one. But then I'd think about that folder. That smug smile. The way they'd all treated my apartment like it was community property. Like I was just holding it until someone else needed it more. And I'd remember that I wasn't crazy. I was just done being quiet. 2 months passed. No birthdays. No dinners. No contact. Then one night, I got a voicemail from my Aunt Carolina. She's my mom's older sister and has always been the only one in the family who treated me like more than a background character. Her voice was soft, almost apologetic. Hey, Mijo. I don't want to stir anything up, but I thought you should know. Your mom told people you were going through something, that you were having a breakdown. That's why you backed out of helping Sophia. I don't believe it, but others are starting to. Just call me if you need anything. I'm here. A breakdown. That's the story they went with. Not, Luis stood up for himself. Not, Luis made a boundary. Not even Luis refused to give up his home. No, it was a mental breakdown. I laughed out loud when I heard it. Not because it was funny, but because it was predictable. Of course they'd paint it like I was the problem. That way, no one would question why the golden boy suddenly stopped showing up to holidays or answering calls. They needed a narrative that kept them clean. And honestly, I was done caring. That was the night I deleted the family group chat, blocked my parents and Sophia on everything. And then I went out and did something I hadn't done in years. I bought myself dinner. At a real restaurant. Sat alone, phone down, no distractions. I ordered a steak, a glass of wine, and took my time. The waiter even asked if I was celebrating something. Yeah, I said. Closure. That was my turning point. The next morning, I woke up early. I made a list. Not of things to do, but of things I wanted to build. 1. Re-enroll in night classes. 2. Fix up the apartment, not for resale. For me. 3. Start that side hustle I kept putting off. 4. Call Aunt Carolina and thank her. 5. Take a vacation alone. No guilt. 6. Let go. It didn't all happen at once. But brick by brick, I started rebuilding. I picked up a couple freelance design clients on the side and used the extra cash to turn my place into something that felt less like a crash pad and more like a home. New couch. Plants. Paint. I even learned how to install floating shelves. Took me 3 tries, but they didn't fall. Small victories. I signed up for therapy through a local community program. 6 sessions free. And I used every one. Not to vent, but to untangle. To figure out why I still felt like I owed my family something even after everything they'd done. And I learned something important. I wasn't selfish. I was surviving. I hadn't built walls. I'd built a boundary. One I should have drawn years ago. I got into the habit of walking to the park after work. Just a small thing, but those 30-minute walks with music in my ears became sacred. I stopped checking social media so much. Blocked anyone who reposted Sophia's passive-aggressive story quotes. You know the type. Some people only show love when it's convenient, or family isn't always blood. Irony, right? I started sleeping better, eating better, laughing more. And one night, after a long day, I sat on my couch. The same one they once joked looked like something off Craigslist, and I realized I was happy. Truly, not because I had more stuff, but because for the first time, I wasn't living my life as a supporting character in someone else's story. I was the main one. And then came the text. From Sophia. Just 2 words. I'm outside. No warning. No build-up. Just that. I stared at it, heart racing. I hadn't seen her in over 4 months. Didn't know if I wanted to. But something told me this wasn't just a drop-in. So I stood up, walked to the door, and opened it. She was standing there in a hoodie and jeans, holding a plain white envelope. No coffee this time. No smug grin. Just silence. And then she held out the envelope and said quietly, "Before you slam the door, you need to see this." The envelope was heavier than it should have been. Not in the literal sense. It probably weighed less than an ounce, but in that way where you can feel the weight of what's inside. The way you know a text isn't just a text, or a voicemail isn't just a voicemail. This envelope, handed to me by my estranged sister after 4 months of silence, felt like a loaded gun in paper form. Sophia didn't speak right away. She just stood there, arms crossed now like she wasn't sure if she should run or explain. Her eyes were puffy, and not in the "I cried for attention" way. I'd seen that version more times than I could count. This was different. Swollen, tired, like she hadn't slept. Like maybe, for once, the world had stopped revolving just for her. "You gonna let me in?" she asked, voice low. I stepped aside and let her walk past. She didn't make any comments about the apartment this time. Didn't critique the furniture or ask about the framed quote I'd hung by the door. "Protect your peace like it's your rent money." I'd found it online a few weeks ago and laughed so hard I bought it on impulse. Now, watching her glance at it as she walked in, I realized she recognized the irony too. She sat on the edge of the couch like a guest, not like the entitled co-owner she used to imagine herself as. I stayed standing, envelope still in my hand. "What is it?" I asked. She hesitated, then said, "It's everything. Just open it." I slid a finger under the seal and pulled out the contents, a letter, handwritten, and a stack of printed screenshots behind it. I scanned the first few lines. It was an apology, not a perfect one, not poetic or dramatic, but real, written in Sophia's uneven print, with scratched-out words and side notes like she couldn't decide how to say certain things. She admitted to lying to the family, admitted that she had exaggerated what I said, that she told people I'd already agreed to sign over part of the apartment because, in her words, it made me feel safe to pretend like I had a safety net. She admitted that Mom and Dad pushed her, that they encouraged the lie and told her Luis will come around. He always does. She said they wanted the story out there because it made them look good, the generous, modern parents raising such selfless children. And then she wrote something I didn't expect. "I know I messed up. I know I've been a brat for most of my life. But I thought if I could just lock in that piece of security, I'd finally stop feeling like a failure. Like you passed me a long time ago and never looked back. I know that's not your fault. I'm just tired of feeling like the one who always needs help." I read it twice, and then I flipped to the screenshots. They were texts. From our parents. Dozens of them. Some between them and Sophia. Some in the group thread they'd removed me from after the apartment fallout. And every single one of them painted a picture I hadn't fully seen before. "Tell people," he agreed. "He won't embarrass us by backing out later. Remind him how depressed you got last spring. He won't risk that happening again. If he says no, say it's just temporary. Then we'll make it legal after. He owes us for everything we've done." They weren't just pushing Sophia. They were plotting. Deliberately. Strategically. Coldly. I sat down without realizing I'd moved. My ears were ringing. I thought I'd already reached the peak of their manipulation, that showing up with a deed contract and spreading rumors about my mental health was the worst they could do. I was wrong. They'd orchestrated the whole thing. And Sophia, she'd gone along with it. Until, apparently now. I looked up at her, and she met my eyes without flinching. "I didn't know how deep it went until I saw what they were saying behind my back, too," she said. "They wanted to use me, Luis. Just like they've used you for years. And I let them. I was stupid. I was scared. And now?" I asked. She nodded toward the screenshots. "Now I want to help." I laughed, but it was hollow. "Why?" "Because I know what they'll do next," she said. "And you deserve to see it coming." I didn't want to trust her. Not yet. But something in her voice, something in her posture, told me this wasn't just guilt. It was fear. And that made me sit up. "What do you mean? What they'll do next?" I asked. Sophia exhaled slowly, then pulled out her phone. "They think you've been lying. About the trust. About everything. They think you had assets to spite them. And Mom, she's talking to a lawyer." That caught my attention. "They're actually trying to sue me? She thinks she can prove you signed the property over verbally. That there was an implied agreement." I blinked. "That's not how the law works." "I know. But it doesn't matter. If she files, it becomes public. They just want to make noise. Humiliate you. Scare you." I sat back, brain racing. Not with panic, but calculation. Because if they wanted war, I'd give it to them. But not like they expected. The next day, I took a personal day from work. Sat in a local coffee shop with my laptop, Sophia across from me, sipping hot chocolate like she was 12 again. It was surreal, but I wasn't in the mood for nostalgia. I was planning. "Here's what we're going to do," I said, sliding my screen so she could see the doc. Step 1, control the narrative. Step 2, document everything. Step 3, expose the pattern. Step 4, cut off access. Step 5, public checkmate. We spent 5 hours combing through texts, emails, voicemails, old family group messages, anything that painted the picture of coercion, financial manipulation, and reputation sabotage. Sophia was surprisingly helpful. She even found a voice memo from Mom pressuring her to make Luis feel responsible by bringing up her past breakdowns. I uploaded everything into a secure drive and sent it to my lawyer. Because yes, I had one. Remember that trust? I didn't draw it up on LegalZoom. I'd hired a discreet, sharp real estate and asset protection attorney when I first started sniffing out my family's tactics. A guy named Arthur, mid-40s, calm as still water, and terrifying when he spoke softly. I emailed him a summary of the situation. He responded in 10 minutes. Understood. Recommend cease and desist prep. We'll also draft a press statement. Loop me in when they go public. Time to flip the board. Flip the board. Yeah, I like that. Sophia and I didn't talk much outside of planning. There was too much scar tissue. Too many years of tension and unspoken resentment. But when we worked, we were focused. She sent me the final batch of texts late that night with a short message. They think I'm still on their side. I'll let you know when they move. The next morning, it came. A Facebook post from my mother. Long, vague, passive-aggressive, the kind that dripped with sanctimony. We raised our children to support one another. We taught them the value of sharing, of love, of sacrifice. It's heartbreaking when one forgets these values in favor of selfish ambition. But we continue to pray. Family means everything. There were likes, comments, support from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. Sophia texted me one word. Now. I picked up the phone. Called Arthur. It's time. The moment my mother's Facebook post went live, the war officially began, but I didn't storm in guns blazing. No, I let her build her own little tower of martyrdom one brick at a time. The post was public, tagged with dramatic hashtags like #FamilyFirst and #DisappointedButNotDefeated, and filled with flowery language about sacrifice and support. It painted her and my dad as the victims of a selfish, ungrateful son. Sophia's name wasn't mentioned, but the implication was clear. She expected people to rally, to pat her on the back and tell her she'd raised one good child and one lost one. And at first, that's exactly what happened. Cousins, church friends, distant relatives I hadn't seen in years flooded the comments with sympathy. I'm so sorry you're going through this. Luis was always so quiet. Who knew he could be so cold? Praying for healing in your family. But I wasn't surprised. I was prepared. Because 2 hours after that post went up, Arthur sent the email. It wasn't dramatic. No threats, no capital letters. Just a professionally worded cease and desist, complete with attached legal documentation proving the apartment's trust ownership, screenshots of my mother and father discussing how to fabricate a narrative for social media, and, just to top it off, a draft of a press release outlining how their defamatory claims were being spread in violation of civil code. The subject line? Notice of false claims and legal action pending. Arthur blind copied me on it. 10 minutes later, my mother's post disappeared. Sophia confirmed. My parents were on the phone with their lawyer within the hour. And the fallout? It came fast. First, the silence. That tight, eerie silence that follows a building implosion. No texts. No calls. Just nothing. My parents had realized, finally, that I wasn't bluffing. That I hadn't just pulled away to make a point. I'd removed myself entirely. Legally, financially, emotionally. I was no longer the reliable son they could guilt or manipulate. I had walls now. Documents. Evidence. And the worst part? A witness. Sophia. They didn't see her coming. They'd assumed she would crumble when pressured, like always. But she didn't. She held firm. She told them she was done lying. That she was tired of being a pawn. They screamed, apparently. Accused her of betrayal. Of siding with the enemy. My dad even threatened to cut her off financially. Not that he was paying for anything at the time, but the illusion of control was all he had left. And she told them, simply. Luis stood up for himself. And you hate that. I didn't go public. I didn't need to. But I did send one message. Not to the world, but to the small circle of family who mattered. Aunts, uncles, cousins I still respected. People who'd quietly messaged me asking if everything was okay. I kept it short. Hey, I saw the post. Just so you know, it was false. I've removed myself from a toxic dynamic that's been building for years. I own my apartment through a trust, and my family tried to forcibly take part of it. I said no. I have all the proof. If you want to know more, I'm here. If not, that's okay too. Just don't believe everything you see on Facebook. The response? Surprisingly supportive. A few distant cousins even admitted they'd heard whispers for years about the way I was treated. One of my uncles called me and said, "Took guts, Mijo. Proud of you. Been watching from the sidelines too long." And then there was Aunt Carolina. She showed up to my apartment 3 days after the email went out. No notice. Just knocked, holding a casserole dish and a brown paper bag with wine. "Figured you could use a visit from someone who doesn't want your deed," she said, winking. We sat on the balcony and watched the city lights blink on. She didn't push for details. Just let me talk. And when I was done, she hugged me and said something I'd never heard from anyone in my family. You protected yourself. That's not selfish. That's smart. I didn't cry, but I came close. The real revenge, though, it didn't come from lawyers. It came from living better. Quietly. Confidently. Without apology. I started posting small life updates. Not to flex, just to share. My apartment renovation? I finished it. Posted a photo of the new kitchen backsplash I installed myself. Got a ton of comments, including one from a former coworker who asked if I could help him remodel. That led to 2 freelance jobs, then 5. Before I knew it, I had a side business. I registered it under an LLC. Guess who helped me file the paperwork? Sophia. Yep. We weren't best friends, not overnight. But something shifted. We had real conversations now. Shared silence that wasn't uncomfortable. She admitted she'd started therapy. Said she realized how much of her identity was built around being the one who needed saving. I want to be someone who builds now, she said once. And she meant it. We weren't rebuilding what we had. We were building something new. And it felt honest. My parents? They faded out. After the lawyers sent one more follow-up confirming that any continued defamation would result in real legal consequences, and that we had a case for damages, they stopped trying to reach out. No apology. No ownership. Just silence. And I was okay with that. Because I didn't need them to admit anything. I already had everything I needed. I had my home. My peace. My life. 1 year later, almost to the day, I hosted a small dinner at my place. Just 6 people. Aunt Carolina. Sophia. My 2 closest friends from work. A neighbor I'd become tight with. And a woman I'd recently started seeing. Quiet. Kind. Smart. Nothing dramatic. Just real. During dessert, someone asked, "So what's next for you?" And for the first time in a long time, I didn't hesitate. I said whatever I want. And I meant it. Because this wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming my story. My time. My name. My value. And as we clinked glasses and laughed and shared stories on that quiet, warm night, I thought back to that moment at the cafe, the folder, the smirks, the entitlement, and I realized something. They tried to make me give up my apartment. Instead, they taught me how to own myself.